She fled bombs and war in Ukraine, only to be brutally attacked in the place that she thought would finally bring her peace. 23-year-old Iryna Zarutska, a young refugee, sat quietly with her headphones in when a man that she had never spoken to suddenly rose from his seat, pulled a knife, and changed everything in an instant. How could someone who had escaped a war zone end up losing her life on a train in America? And why was her killer free despite a long history of violence and mental illness? Today, we'll talk about Iryna's journey from Kyiv to Charlotte, the chilling minutes that were caught on surveillance video, and the extensive background of the man accused of killing her. The story of Iryna Zarutska is not just one about tragedy on a train. It's about how a repeat offender slipped through the cracks too. Welcome to the True Crime Nurse, everybody. My name is Kat, and I'm a registered nurse who loves all things nursing and true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and leave me a comment down below for any case suggestions that you have, and I will be sure to take a look into them. Today's case has been really heavy on my heart ever since I saw the video, and if you have questions like I did, you're in the right place. All right, everybody, let's get into it. Iryna was born and raised in Kyiv, Ukraine. When the Russian invasion began in 2022, her and her family endured the early months of war firsthand. At one point, she had to shelter in a bomb bunker during those heavy attacks on the capital. In 2022, she immigrated to the United States with her mother, brother, and sister, eventually settling in Charlotte, North Carolina. For Iryna, America represented hope, opportunity, and stability after so much uncertainty in Ukraine. Her relatives later said that she loved America deeply and felt truly grateful to be building a life here. Back in Kyiv, Iryna had earned a degree from a local college in art. She was creative and talented with a strong interest in design and animals. After moving to Charlotte, she set her sights on a career in working in the veterinary field with hopes of someday becoming a veterinary assistant. She studied English diligently, learned to drive, and the moment that her U.S. work permit was approved, she secured a job that very same day. That just tells you what a hard worker she was. In Charlotte, Iryna worked at a local pizza restaurant and oftentimes helped neighbors by walking their dogs. She was known for her warmth and her radiant smile, which neighbors remembered seeing as she passed by walking their pets. She also volunteered in the community, including with seniors and animal care organizations. Her love of animals was truly a defining trait, though. Friends said that she felt happiest when she was surrounded by pets and dreamt of working full-time with them. Although her life was tragically cut short at just 23, her family has chosen to bury her here in the United States, not in Ukraine, because of how strongly she embraced this place as her new home. Iryna is remembered as a hardworking, compassionate, and hopeful young woman and someone who had survived the trauma of war only to be taken by senseless violence in the very place that she thought she was safe. On the night of August 22, 2025, the Link's Blue Line light rail in Charlotte moved steadily through the city. At about 9:50 p.m., Iryna got on the train near the South End neighborhood. For her, this was routine because she usually used the train to get around Charlotte. Surveillance footage shows her entering the car and settling into her aisle seat with headphones in her ears. She appeared calm, in her own world, doing what many commuters do. A man named Decarlos Brown was already on the train. He sat in the seat directly behind her. There was no exchanges between them, no eye contact, and no words. To anyone watching, it looked like nothing more than two strangers just riding on a train at the same time heading home at the end of their day. For about 4 minutes, the ride was uneventful. Passengers sat quietly. Some were looking at their phones, others were looking out the windows just gazing. But the train moved towards the next station, and then, without warning, Brown's behavior shifted. He slipped his hand into his pocket out of his hoodie and pulled out a small folding knife, and this is seen on surveillance. In one smooth movement, he flipped it open. Passengers seated nearby would later say that it was almost impossible to anticipate what would happen next because it was so fast and unexpected. Brown leaned forward and began stabbing Iryna from behind. He struck her multiple times, at least 3, with one blade thrust piercing her neck. The violence was sudden and silent, and it was horrifying to watch the look on her face. There were no words exchanged and no confrontation, just an immediate explosion of lethal force against a young woman who had no chance to defend herself. In the video, you can see blood in the train car and Iryna slowly slumping over in her seat, looking both scared and confused. I read in reports that a handful of passengers allegedly ran toward Iryna maybe after Brown exited, but from the clips that I saw, people calmly walked away and nobody tried to help her. She looked around confused, horrified, and scared in her final moments, and nobody was there for her. She even looked right at the person sitting next to her, almost asking her for help. If anyone had promptly intervened and applied pressure to her neck wound, she might still be here. They saw her collapse forward with blood on her clothing. I understand people being afraid that they may be attacked next, but the nurse in me just cannot wrap my mind around it. But I also understand that I am hardwired to run towards chaos if I saw something like this to save her life. Allegedly, someone called out for help and others fumbled for their phones to dial 911. Brown walked away from the chaos. He didn't appear frantic, and he walked calmly towards the doors of the train like nothing had happened. As he moved, he pulled off his hoodie as if he was trying to change his appearance, though. The train operator followed emergency procedures, and he brought the train to a halt at the East-West Boulevard station. According to reports, passengers huddled around Iryna, desperately trying to stop the bleeding. Some pressed clothing to her wounds, and others crouched beside her, pleading for her to hold on. Within about 2 minutes of the attack, the train doors slid open at the station platform. Brown stepped out, intending to simply walk away, but by then the police officers had already arrived and they confronted Brown on the platform immediately. He was arrested. Officers later noted that he had sustained minor injuries, but it was unclear whether those occurred during the actual stabbing itself or in the chaotic aftermath. Back in the train car, paramedics rushed aboard to find Iryna gravely wounded. Her injuries were catastrophic. Despite immediate efforts to try to save her life, there was nothing that could be done. Within minutes, paramedics pronounced Iryna dead on the scene. Once the scene was secured, passengers were escorted off the train. A third passenger that was not physically attacked but was traumatized by what they had witnessed collapsed on the ground and had to be taken to the hospital for treatment too. Now we need to talk about the man that caused all of this chaos. Decarlos Brown Jr. had a long history of criminal offenses and mental health struggles prior to this fatal stabbing. Brown is a 34-year-old Charlotte area resident who was no stranger to law enforcement with an extensive criminal record spanning well over a decade. Records show that Brown had been arrested at least 14 times since 2011 for a variety of offenses. His past crimes include serious felonies and violent incidents. He had prior convictions for robbery with a dangerous weapon, felony larceny, breaking and entering, and shoplifting, among many other charges. In one case, Brown was convicted of armed robbery around 2014 and served about 5 years in prison for that offense alone. After completing that sentence, he was released in September 2020, but trouble would soon follow. Shortly after getting out, Brown was arrested once again, this time for an alleged assault on his own sister at her home in Charlotte. Brown's pattern of criminal behavior was often accompanied by many signs of severe mental illness, and this is something that we've talked about at length recently in other videos, like with Christopher Scarver. His family members and official reports reveal that Brown had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, which, as we've talked about recently, is a diagnosis that came after years of increasingly erratic behavior. Brown's mother has spoken publicly about her son's struggles, explaining that as he grew more aggressive following his prison term, she sought out court intervention to get him psychiatric help. In 2021, she successfully obtained an involuntary commitment order from the courts, leading to Brown being placed under psychiatric observation for about 2 weeks. During that hospitalization, doctors formally diagnosed him with schizophrenia and started him on treatment. However, once Brown was released back into the community, maintaining his treatment proved really difficult. According to his mother, Brown stopped consistently taking his prescribed medications and, of course, his behavior deteriorated once again. I know we've talked about this before, but stopping antipsychotics results in the symptoms coming back and or worsening, so this would be catastrophic. He became so unstable and confrontational at home that his mother ultimately felt forced to kick him out of the house, rendering him homeless. Brown's mental health issues manifested in really bizarre encounters with authorities, too. In January 2025, Charlotte police responded to a series of false 911 calls that Brown had made while at a local hospital called Novant Health. During a welfare check related to those calls, Brown told the officers that he had been implanted with a, quote, man-made material, unquote, that was controlling all of his basic bodily functions like eating, walking, and talking. He demanded that officials investigate this imaginary material in his body. When officers explained that they couldn't assist him with this, Brown grew really upset and continued to call 911, which led to his arrest for misuse of the 911 system. Although he was charged over the incident, he was released without bond shortly after. Court records from that case indicate that even then, questions were raised about Brown's psychiatric stability. He was having active delusions, so of course he wasn't stable. In July of 2025, a public defender in one of Brown's pending cases questioned his competence to stand trial, so a judge ordered a forensic mental evaluation. From what I could find, that evaluation had not been completed by the time of this August attack. Had that been done timely, we might not be here today. In addition to the January 2025 incident, police logs showed that CMPD had multiple interactions with Brown throughout 2024 as he cycled through homelessness and mental health crises. On at least 3 occasions in 2024 alone, officers encountered Brown behaving erratically and tried to connect him with mental health resources in the community. Here's my problem though, guys. This is something that we see a lot in the hospitals as well. Resources, especially for those that are suffering with mental health problems, are only as good as the person's ability to utilize them appropriately. Do we think that someone that is repeatedly calling the authorities to examine their body is mentally capable to schedule psychiatric visits or pick up their own medication? In my opinion, no. Being homeless and without a support system, no way. He absolutely should have been in inpatient psychiatric care long before we continue on with what happened. Okay, rant over. Despite these interventions, Brown was not under any form of custody, court supervision, or court-mandated treatment on the night of August 22nd, 2025. He was essentially a free man on the public transport system alongside strangers like Iryna Zarutska. This could have happened to anyone. At the time of the train stabbing, Decarlos Brown was still unhomed and had not even purchased a fare for that ride. Charlotte Transit officials later confirmed that Brown was actually a fare jumper who didn't even have a valid ticket when he boarded that train. This became a huge conversation about transit security, and it really stresses how a person was able to freely access the train system that others are paying for. Brown had entered the rail car easily despite a lifetime ban from Charlotte Transit, the CAT system, that would issue it after the attack. CMPD homicide unit detectives responded to the scene that night, gathering the video evidence, and they also interviewed all of the witnesses, some of which had been made public by now. By the next day, August 23rd, police formally announced that Brown would be charged. Once doctors cleared him from discharge of the hospital from those minor injuries we talked about, Brown was taken into police custody and booked on a charge for first-degree murder for Iryna's death. Under North Carolina law, first-degree murder is a capital offense, and given the circumstances of an unprovoked deadly attack, it fits the bill. A judge ordered that Brown be held without bond pending trial. In Brown's initial court appearance, which took place just a few days after the incident, the judge kept the no bail order in place. During one early court hearing, members of Iryna Zarutska's family were present, and they delivered emotional speeches. Zarutska's uncle addressed the court directly, begging the judge to keep Brown behind bars. Her uncle said that Iryna was a sweet angel and, quote, "The accused has taken a very bright, beautiful woman from our family, and we are heartbroken by that. I asked the court not to release him and let him potentially be a menace to other people," unquote. The judge agreed, and Brown remained in the Mecklenburg County Jail following his hospital release, confined as he awaited further legal proceedings. Given Decarlos Brown's known mental health history and the apparent randomness of the crime, there are continuous questions about whether or not he's even fit to stand trial. Mecklenburg County prosecutors and defense attorneys both said that Brown's mental state would absolutely require evaluation. Within a couple of weeks of the arrest, a Mecklenburg judge ordered Brown to undergo a comprehensive psychiatric competency evaluation in a hospital setting for up to 60 days to determine if he is mentally fit to participate in his own defense. This is common in cases where defendants have documented mental illnesses, especially as serious as schizophrenia. As of the latest updates in mid-September 2025, Brown was indeed transferred to a state psychiatric facility for this competency assessment under custody, and his next court date is actually scheduled for September 19th, 2025 to review all the findings, so very soon. If Decarlos Brown is competent and is convicted, he faces a maximum punishment of life in prison or even federal death penalty due to both federal and state involvement in this case. Zarutska's family have been privately grieving, but they have released a few statements through representatives. Aside from the uncle's statement in the court, the family set up a public GoFundMe page in order to help with Iryna's funeral costs and other expenses, which I will also link if you feel inclined to donate. The GoFundMe also shared some touching details about her life. The fundraiser shared that Ira, her nickname, recently arrived in the United States seeking safety from the war and hoping for a brand new beginning, and tragically, her life was cut far too short. By early September, the GoFundMe had already amassed $80,000, and now at the time of my research, it's well over $200,000. North Carolina's Attorney General Jeff Jackson took to social media to describe the crime, quote, as an outrageously heinous and vicious act. Iryna was killed while sitting peacefully, and innocent life was taken in a shocking and brutal way, end quote. Jackson pledged the full support of the state DOJ and the local district attorney prosecution team, saying that they have told the district attorney that their office will provide any and all support to truly deliver justice, and they will remain steadfast until that justice is served. This case illustrates the need for stronger tools to keep violent, mentally unstable individuals from slipping back into the community untreated and without appropriate help and resources. Mecklenburg County faces a shortage of mental health resources, which is a huge problem dating back to budget cuts in the early 2000s that reduced psychiatric hospital beds without sufficient community care replacements. As a result, mentally ill people in crisis often stay in emergency rooms or jails without any timely treatment. Coupled with a backlog of nearly 300 pending homicide cases in Charlotte and an understaffed prosecutor's office with only about 85 prosecutors for a large jurisdiction, the system there is clearly strained. Mecklenburg County officials indicated that they would push hard for the state legislature to fund more mental health facilities and allow more flexibility for judges to hold violent offenders accountable, even if they're mentally ill, before they can hurt others. I think that this is a good move, but I also hate that these changes always occur after horrifying losses like this. The changes have come far too late for Iryna. Several fundraising campaigns have appeared on GoFundMe attempting to actually support the suspect, Decarlos Brown Jr. These campaigns framed Brown as a victim of systemic failures, arguing that the judicial and mental health systems had actually failed him and implying that he wasn't entirely to blame for what happened. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments down below, because I know that that's something that a lot of people are going to be kind of polarized about, but GoFundMe quickly responded to the backlash. The company removed the defense fund campaigns for Brown, citing a policy that prohibits fundraisers for individuals formally charged with violent crimes. In a public statement, GoFundMe reiterated their terms of service and that they explicitly ban any campaigns raising money for the legal defense of an alleged perpetrator of a violent crime. I actually wasn't even aware of this until now. Let me know if you guys knew about this, but the offending fundraisers were taken down within a day of being created. Observers noted that these pages appeared to have been started by supporters or even some trolls online, and they had very little, if any money at all, had donated to them before they were removed. This only added to the emotional intensity surrounding this case, though. The stabbing of Iryna Zarutska transformed a horrifying local crime into a symbol of larger conversations about violence, public safety, and justice. For the people who personally knew and loved Iryna, however, it is first and foremost an unspeakable tragedy. A young woman who endured war and sought refuge in America had her life brutally stolen on a quiet train ride home. As her mother, siblings, and extended family mourn, they have the support of communities all the way from Charlotte to Kyiv and a promise from authorities that justice will be delivered. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and CMPD are still piecing together every single detail of the incident, though the facts are already pretty clear since they were captured on video and also had tons of witnesses. The coming trials, state and possibly federal, will provide a formal account of what happened on the train, and it's also going to determine Brown's fate. Now we wait. Let me know if you guys would like me to make a follow-up video, especially after the 19th, once the psychiatric evaluations come back and the subsequent trial. I would honestly be shocked if he were deemed fit to stand trial, but let me know your thoughts. Thank you for watching today's video, you guys. This case is heartbreaking and has so many layers as always, so thank you for sticking it out and watching it. Today's a bonus episode this week, so similar to the Baby Emmanuel Harrow video, we will still have a video going up this weekend. Don't forget to drop a butterfly or secret handshake in the chat, and have an amazing week, you guys. I'll see you next weekend. Oh, nurse's orders. Bye.